only wants you to make good beer and have fun hanging out with your friends. Here's Dono.
Today the feature ingredient and ingredient experiment of the day is from Gambrinus. It's a type of malt that they have called IPA malt. Now, Chip got us this sack of malt from our good friends at BSG, who are also sponsoring some of these batches of brew. And what they say about this particular malt is they kind of are calling out IPAs, which makes sense based on the title of the malt, but they're saying the color is maybe a little darker than a Pilsner, and they say provides balancing sweetness and body in the presence of piney, juicy, and tropical hop profiles. So my impression is that's probably going to be a somewhat characterful malt item. This malt might have a little more to it than the lightest Pilsner, delivering a delicate profile of bread, toast, grain, and slight nuttiness. So now Dawson suggested a few recipes. One thing he thought would be good for a style to use this malt in his Patersbier, which I first made in 2010. So I have been making a Patersbier for a while, but I do see that I maybe got the idea from a Northern Brewer kit or something. Normally this malt would just be Pils and the hops would be light, and then the yeast needs to be a Belgian yeast, but the thing I'm doing different is this malt. So it's basically just like making any old blonde ale that's not overly hoppy. And again, I'm just wanting to see what you get out of this IPA malt. You could dose it up with a bunch of hops, and it's supposed to be able to stand up to that. Chip is going to make, I forget what he's going to make, and then Dustin might make a red IPA. So we're going to see what we get, and then just the other note of interest is it is the Tour de France time around here, so I'm watching that right now. They're currently going up the Col de Tourmalet, which is an epic mountain climb. And the nice thing about having this Peacock is I can just pause it and just come back to it whenever. But let's get back to the brewing. We have some rain, which I don't know about y'all, but we've had lots and lots and lots of rain. The Mississippi has been flooded. The hops for today are these Tettnang. They are 2.6% alpha acid, 2.6. So I'm just going to do 2 ounces of these for a 60-minute boil, which will give it a nominal amount of bitterness. And then I do have a 1/3 ounce, and I think at the end I will do another ounce, maybe for a hop stand. But yeah, we'll get all this stirred in there and start the timer. I will get a definitive reading, but it looks like it'll be at least 1050. And you can see the color, it's a little darker probably than just a Pils malt would get you. I have Imperial Triple Double, which I believe is their Trappist high gravity. I'm not making a starter. I feel like for these 1050 beers, for the pitching out of the pack, especially if it's not a lager, I've had pretty good luck. One thing I was surprised by is this temperature range, 65 to 77. I kind of thought it would be lower. Actually, I mean, I'm not trying to get it too much over 70, and I'm going to put ice jugs in this tub and put a blanket over on the top, try to keep it a little cooler because the room is like 72-ish. If it was left to its own devices, it would probably get up to that 77 or higher, but I'm actually trying to not have that happen. So we'll see what I can maintain the temperature at. But otherwise, I got a little over 5 gallons, 1050 plus. Everything looks good. It is now the second day after I brewed this, and it was fermenting actively on the first day after I brewed it, not terribly the night of. And that was because I did have it pretty cool. I have a thermometer sticker down here, but I also have this thing, and right now it's warmer. It's up to 70, but it actually was 62 with some of these ice jugs. I think I had like 4 of them. And then I have this blanket, you know, all around the top, and then a little more on top of there. Let's just see what we got for a wall temp. Okay, that's what I thought. 73, and then I do have a thermometer somewhere around here, and it was also reading about there. So I am keeping it a little cooler than the room temp, and also with active fermentation it would increase the temperature more. I was just trying to keep it in the middle to the lower of the temperature range. That's just usually what I do. It's what I like to do if I'm not trying to get an abundance of Belgian yeast character, which in this case I'm not. That certainly will have some of that yeast character, but I'm also going to be able to taste the malt. But yeah, here's my ice jug freezing operation. They got to be tilted, you know, so the water can stay down in there. But at any rate, it is fermenting, and I'm watching the temperature. I thought it might be fun to do a quick video of this. We'll see if it's fun or not fun. This is what I call my ghetto cold crash method. I have not a space in the fridge for cold crashing, so as you can see, I had this blanket around. This is just a plastic tub, and I have this other kind of warmish blanket here, and that is all to keep all of these ice jugs. These are like liter 1.5, 1.75 liter jugs, all of ice. They were all frozen, plus, you know, packets like this, some more packets, some more jugs. And what we want to see is what is the temperature of the beer. It was about 70, 47. So the last time I did this, 46. I got it down to 39, which is basically just a little bit colder than this. I can't really see it on my camera, but if I read it, it's like 44, 46. So yeah, I went from about 70 room temp to that. So not too bad. It will help have cleared it, but then I'm also going to add gelatin, so hopefully it will help drop stuff out. Although I couldn't really do the title. If we can. Hey. Alright, so here is the Patersbier. It is clear, although it got quite clear, although in this, it doesn't look as clear as the nice lagers we just were drinking, but I did do a cold crash, I did do a gelatin process. It went from 1053 original gravity to 1.005, which was lower than I would have expected from the triple-double Belgian Trappist high gravity yeast, no starter made. It did ferment in the upper 60s, I believe. I did not let it get higher than that. Fermentation was fine, obviously. The whole experiment here is, what does this Gambrinus IPA malt taste like? And they say it possesses an elusive color falling between very pale Pilsner and golden pale ale malt, tailor-made to complement contemporary West Coast IPAs or any big
hoppy IPA. It provides balancing sweetness, embodying the presence of piney, juicy tropical hop profiles, delivering a delicate profile of bread, toast, grain, and slight nuttiness. That's from Gambrinus.
It was our idea to put
BSG
Yeah.
right up. So we will drink it, and then I do have some comments from a brewer who made a beer with this malt, and he made a big hoppy beer, which this is not. This was, the hops were just Tettnang. 2 ounces of Tettnang, 2.6% alpha acid. That's like 1/6 of your Magnum hop that you used in that other beer. So 2 ounces at 60, 1 ounce at the end for S&Gs. I don't know if you get any hop aroma.
If I can hijack some exposition, I don't know if you've already said this. The idea was this malt is being custom built by Gambrinus to be the foundation for West Coast IPAs. We were interested, and we asked Dawson, who works at RBSG, what else would you do with this? Let's just try to think of something that's not a West Coast IPA. He thought it would be cool to do kind of like a gold, red, brown, and Patersbier Session Cascadian Dark, which I've yet to brew, and maybe some kind of red, to just see what we get from a malt that side by side you could say, oh, it's kind of like Turo, or it's kind of like this, and we found that it is very different.
So this Patersbier normally would make with pills, and also the Belgian yeast, and it's kind of like a Belgian blonde. I first made this beer in 2010. It's been one I've made several times. It's one I just kind of like. When you want a light, nice, flavorful drinking beer that just is a tiny bit interesting, and really that's the Belgian yeast that gives it just a little extra flavor. This beer does have that. However, this beer has more than a regular Patersbier, and I feel that's because of this IPA malt.
Malt flavor, not necessarily phenolics from yeast.
You're right. So
it doesn't finish quite as like candy malt clean that Pils often does.
Sure.
Like this definitely seems honeyish. I wouldn't say biscuity, that's too much, but like a blonde toastiness.
honey's good. They say bready,
Yeah.
nutty, almost like a. You said toasted, almost like a toast. Not burnt toast, but like a bready sweet toast with butter, just kind of a character like that.
People we've read about that have brewed it, actual West Coast IPAs, they're also noticing that that malt character transforms the hoppiness to some degree. They like start to get peach ring, where maybe they were only getting citrus and pine. So I think it's in the alchemy that is brewing. This is a malt that's like, okay, you've got some color around the edges as well. You're not just like this base malt foundation.
So on the BSG website for this malt, there's a link to an article of this other brewer who made a beer. He made a West Coast IPA with this beer, and he said it really does balance the finish and kind of round it off when you're putting some intentional IBU into your beer. Having a little malt character helps to make it unique from Pilsner and Turo, and I absolutely can see that sentiment. I think this malt would be really good in one of my India Pale Lagers. Any beer that you really want to dose it up with bitterness, hop flavor, hop aroma, make a big beer. You know, West Coast is kind of interesting because you think of that as being drier, and I feel like this malt, I don't know how dry this malt would present itself, but it just has a residual kind of sweet character, even at 1.005.
What did they get
That's
mashed at, temp-wise?
I didn't write it down on here.
Just saying that like that could also be a thing. You can mash something like this lower
Well, I
because
didn't-
it's got a little more residual character.
Wouldn't have mashed it overly low, but I can.
I feel like a Patersbier in general would also maybe be in the upper 140s, but
152.
oh, okay. I mean, then that's definitely letting the residual side kind of speak a little bit more. But it's still got the 1005. That goes to say something
That's what
about
I
the
don't get,
impression
like,
of
I look
sweetness
at-
versus actual. That's where I think the flavor of a malt comes in versus its fermentability.
Like, what if it was 10-12? Like, how would this taste? Like, even sweeter, I would think.
Right.
Do you think there's something about it has a very restrained Belgian yeast character, but there's something about those aspects of Belgian yeast that that hint at sweetness, even if you don't
True.
taste sweet. Like, I don't know, how
I think of the Belgian yeast as the spiciness.
the spicy. Okay.
You know, I don't know. I don't think of it as a sweet contribution, but that's me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my
I could
association,
see,
right?
like,
Is that
stone fruity vibes kind of coming from
Is
some
that
of those
Belgian
yeast, like-
beers aren't super bitter, and so then like the qualities you're getting out of it are like
Right.
spicy floral,
Sweeter and alcoholic.
Yeah.
Like a triple.
It's almost
Yeah.
like the intense
Strong
yeast
golden.
character mimics being bitter because it's still like just an assault to some extent or a charge.
Because I wouldn't describe this as a sweet beer, but there's I don't know, there's like something in there that is more character than
I think it's the yeast. It's not the hops because they're just so light and so low alpha acid. Yeah, this beer normally is about a delicious Pils malt and this little kiss of flavor from the Belgian yeast. This particular beer is kind of about a little bit more of a malt presentation and then also the Belgian yeast. This is not a bad beer and I don't dislike drinking it, but it is not the best Patersbier that you're gonna have, if that's really what you're trying to go for. I like this malt. I don't think this is the showcase for it. I think that this guy that I was quoting from is more on track with just making like a big, and I have some of this malt, or did I use it? I think I used it in this beer I just brewed. Anyway, so I can't use it. I can't use it in the India Pale Lager this winter unless I get some more. But
Oh, we'll get more. Or I've got some right there.
wow,
'Cause I'm
Either
talking
way.
about section CDA, so I won't need. I think there's 18 pounds over there.
yeah, right.
But I would
Yeah, I
almost.
know.
I was gonna ask if you did an IPA, would you? I feel like you would still blend it like 50
Probably.
pills, 50
Yeah, yeah,
It's like you
probably.
still wouldn't want it to like lean too
Yeah.
far away from
I might.
what you know works for you.
I might, and I think I'd have to check my notes, but I think I'd throw in like some kind of carrot hills, carrot stand, something, like some other kind of little bit of other things too. But do you guys like this? What you think this malt makes in this beer? Is it something that you think that you would want to use, or you're like, you know what, I kind of prefer the more drier pills or the more, Morris Otter
Well,
or whatever.
for this beer, it's you kind of already answered it. We all tasted a side by side of Hen House Brewing, who sent us a West Coast IPA, and they both they're aggressively hop, West Coast hop, citrus, pine, and there it was much more minute, but also still apparent. I just feel like this is a malt, and it's interesting to see a maltster going after a style versus going after like, oh, we need to make a unit because we don't have one and everyone else does. They're kind of trying to fill a gap for people who are like, all right, they don't want bone dry this, but they don't want cloyingly sweet that. They want a little more color. They want a little more. I think it just goes to show like maltsters are actually paying as much of attention as like hop growers are.
Well, and it's hard to know too without this compared to your 2010 recipe, right?
Right.
With the pills, then maybe I would say, because this is a delicious beer, and I would for sure drink a full pint of this. But it's hard to know, like, would I prefer this other thing
Right.
in reference to
I think the
that?
beers we've talked about putting it in are probably going to show it better because they are hop forward
Right.
I
beers.
think you can, if anyone is intrigued by the idea of this malt, and if you can access it, and you like to make big hoppy beers, I would say you could consider this malt for that type of a beer, especially.
To your point, it's in between pills and what most malted companies would call their two-row or their pale. more pointedly. So it is,
Mhm.
it's trying to kind of like work that middle ground in a fun way.
Do you think too? It's like right. There's been, especially in like hoppier beers, there's been like a move modern times away from crystal. So it's a way to bring back a little bit of
Yeah.
that quality of crystal. So it's sort of like
Maybe.
nostalgic without that cloying sweetness.
Maybe.
And we all know that
Yeah.
something that's called something like Gambrinus IPA malt, they're not like saying Harrington Pilsner or Harrington, like it could easily be a blend. There could be every 100th kernel is a C40, and that's just enough over
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
overall. So I mean, I
That's
doubt
true.
that this is
it
a
could
single
be,
variety.
It could be pills and pale or something.
Yeah, to that extent, yeah. There's no variety attached.
Mhm.
Like we could probably actually read in and see if it's probably too raw. But point being, like most, we've learned a lot over the last summer. Me working at Roar BSG, that like a lot of things are blends, even if they have a name. Like, but for the reliability and dependability, because of agricultural situations, you ain't trying to like have a whole variety go to toast and now you've got no pills malt. So most of these malts that you feel like are single variety are actually blended for the sake of like making sure you can have them no matter
And
what.
consistency, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
John doesn't like when we get this long-winded, so I feel like we're wrapping it up here.
I don't know how interesting all that is. I'm
Dude,
not
people
sure.
always are like, oh, that was some nerdy
My
insider.
beer is gone, so thanks for watching, and as always, catch you later. And
Stay hydrated.
Still recording.